The moment my attorney pressed play on the recording, my wife of 22 years almost stopped breathing, completely different from the calm, confident woman she had been just minutes earlier. Vanessa had walked into that conference room in downtown Houston with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent 2 years building a plan she believed was flawless. Her attorney had just finished presenting the numbers $95 million in marital assets, $30 million in additional damages, and a petition to dissolve everything I had spent more than 20 years building. She sat across that glass table from me and smiled. A small smile. A satisfied smile. The smile of someone who had planned this for a very long time, and had just watched the final pieces fall perfectly into place. She had no idea what was inside that briefcase. My name is Robert Caldwell. I am 63 years old. I built Caldwell Commercial Group from the ground up in Houston, Texas, starting with nothing except a contractor's license, a willingness to work 80-hour weeks, and a fundamental belief that if you show up and tell the truth, eventually the world rewards you for it. By the time Vanessa filed for divorce, the company was valued somewhere between $185 and $200 million, depending on which quarter you caught us in. 3 states, 47 full-time employees, and contracts with some of the largest municipal projects in the Texas Gulf region. My whole life was in that company. Every late night, every missed birthday, every Friday evening I chose the job site over the dinner table. I want to be honest with you before I go any further. I'm not telling you this story to paint myself as a saint. I was not always easy to love. I was distracted, I was driven, and I made the man's classic mistake of confusing providing with presents. I thought as long as the house was beautiful, the vacations were spectacular, and the accounts had plenty of room in them, I was being a good husband. I was wrong about that. But what I refused to accept is that my blindness justified what she did. It didn't. Nothing does. The divorce filing came on a Tuesday. I remember because I was reviewing blueprints for a water treatment facility bid when Marcus, my attorney, called me. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Rob, she's going for the whole thing." I remember sitting back in my chair and looking out my office window at the Houston skyline, the glass towers catching the afternoon sun, and thinking, I know this feeling. This is the feeling right before a building goes wrong, the silence before the crack. I had suspected something was off for about 18 months. Not dramatically, there was no single moment, no smoking gun, just a gradual accumulation of things that didn't quite fit. The landscaping company she'd hired, run by a 29-year-old named Javier, came twice a week without obvious reason. Our property on the west side of Memorial required maybe one visit every 10 days. But Javier was there Tuesdays and Fridays, consistent as sunrise, always pulling in around the time my car cleared the driveway. I told myself our grounds were complex. I told myself she just wanted them done right. I was so determined to believe the best about her. Then there was Corey, her personal trainer. She'd started intensive training sessions 18 months back, driving down to the private gym he operated out of a converted warehouse off Westheimer. 3 hours, sometimes more, on the days I traveled to Austin or San Antonio for site meetings. I'd paid his monthly invoice. It was aggressive, close to 4 figures without ever questioning it because she seemed happier, more energized. I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was finally getting something right. And then William, British, polished, mid-30s. She'd hired him 8 months ago as a household manager, which I understood in concept. We had staff, we had social obligations, we had a calendar that had genuinely grown complex. William was efficient, thorough, and he had a quality I now recognize as dangerous. He was always where she needed him to be, and never where I thought to look. He'd still be at the house at 10, 30 some nights when I came home from client dinners. He's meticulous, Vanessa would say, that warm smile in place. Honestly, he's the only reason our life runs the way it does. I believed her. I always believed her. The memory that changed everything came back to me 2 days after the divorce filing, while I was lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. About 2 months before she filed, I'd returned from a Dallas site visit. Early weather had shut the project down. I drove back through the night and came through our front door just after 7 a.m. The shower was running. I could hear her voice through the bathroom door, soft and warm in a register I hadn't heard her use with me in years. "I know," she was saying, "but he won't be back until tonight. We have all day." When she came out wrapped in her robe and found me standing in the bedroom, Her recovery was flawless. One beat of surprise, then the bright smile. "I was just talking to Donna. You know she gets anxious when Patrick travels." I believed her. Donna's husband, Patrick, was a local anesthesiologist who barely left the medical center. He didn't travel, but I filed that away somewhere. I wouldn't have to look at it, because looking at it meant tearing apart the entire structure of a life I'd spent 22 years building. 3 days after that 3 a.m. ceiling stare, I drove to a small electronics shop in the Heights and bought 3 voice-activated recording devices, the size of coat buttons. I want to stop here for a second, because if you've ever been in a position where you suspected the person closest to you of something devastating, not knowing for certain, just knowing something is wrong, you understand the particular torture of that drive. Every stoplight feels like an accusation. You want to be wrong. You are hoping with everything in you to be wrong. But the part of you that built a business from scratch by trusting your instincts knows you are not wrong. And that part is merciless. I placed the first device under the lip of the kitchen island, while Vanessa was at her yoga class on a Wednesday morning. The adhesive held against the granite. Unless you were looking for it, you would never find it. The second went under the living room coffee table. The third I kept for later. Then I drove to my office and sat through a board presentation about the Henderson municipal contract and tried very hard to look like a man whose world wasn't quietly ending. Javier arrived at 10:04 that morning. I know because I checked the cloud upload timestamp. I listened to the first recording that evening in my study with the door closed. The initial minutes were ambient refrigerator hum, the tick of the air conditioning, the small sounds of a house at rest. Then, at 10:09, I heard his truck door close. Then her voice at the front door, bright and warm. "You're right on time. I just got back." And his. "You look incredible." Not "good morning," not Mrs. Caldwell. "You look incredible." I stopped the recording. I sat in my chair for a full minute without moving. Then I pressed play again. What followed was 47 minutes of conversation that rewrote 22 years of my life. They talked about my travel schedule like they'd memorized a document. Tuesday Austin trips, Thursday San Antonio runs. The third weekend of every month when I played poker with my partners. They talked about the house, which rooms felt safest, which windows faced the street. And then Vanessa said something that I have thought about almost every day since. "He still thinks I married him for love." She laughed. It was a real laugh, easy and unforced. Not cruel exactly. More like the laugh you make when someone asks if you still believe in Santa Claus. 22 years, and he has absolutely no idea. "What did you marry him for?" Javier asked. "Security, stability, a life I couldn't have built myself." A pause. "The company's worth close to 200 million now. Community property state. Half of that is mine the moment the papers are signed." I pressed stop. Honestly, I don't have words for what that felt like. I've tried to describe it to people who've asked, and nothing I say quite captures it. It wasn't anger. Anger came later. It was something closer to vertigo. Like the floor had become the ceiling while I wasn't paying attention. Every dinner I'd rushed home for. Every vacation I'd organized because she mentioned wanting to go. Every time I'd looked at her across a room and felt lucky, truly, plainly lucky, rewound and played back in a different key. She had been performing. Every single day. I forced myself to listen to the rest. Javier mentioned the others, Corey, William. Vanessa's answer was almost clinical. Different days, different purposes. Corey kept her in shape. William managed what she called the more sophisticated dimensions. And Javier kept things growing. She actually said that. And then she laughed that same easy laugh. And he laughed with her. And I sat in my study and understood for the first time in 22 years exactly what kind of marriage I'd actually been in. I called Marcus the next morning and told him I needed to discuss asset protection. Immediately. His face, when I showed him the transcript, cycled through about 4 emotions before settling on a kind of grim focus. "Rob, this isn't just infidelity. If William is accessing your business financial records to strategize against you, that's potential fraud, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty." He pulled out a legal pad and started moving fast. "We have 6 weeks before the Henderson contract closes. They're timing the filing to catch the company at peak valuation. We need to move now." Those 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was still the husband who came home at a reasonable hour and asked how her day went. On the inside, I was building walls. Marcus worked with financial specialists to restructure ownership, create trusts, establish protections that would take any attorney months to untangle. Meanwhile, the recording devices continued working quietly in my own house, and what they captured kept getting worse. Corey's training session revealed that approximately 30 minutes of a 3-hour block involved actual exercise. The rest was conversation about my patterns, my habits, what they called my blind spots. He said I was predictable. Vanessa agreed. That's his strength at work, and his weakness at home. He trusts the system. He trusts me. He never imagines anyone would be working against him. And Corey said something I've thought about since. Men like that don't stay oblivious forever. And Vanessa said very quietly, he will. I want to be honest with you, if that were me listening to that exchange, I think I would have walked out of my own house and never come back. I don't know how Rob kept his composure. Actually, I do know, because I am Rob. And the answer is this. I had spent 22 years building something real. I was not going to let it be taken from me because I was too proud to be patient. The William recording was the most damaging of all. He had obtained access to my business financial records. I still don't know exactly how, and he had developed a specific strategy to argue that Vanessa's emotional labor and social capital had contributed to the company's growth, enabling a claim far beyond the standard community property split. The Henderson project finalizes in 6 weeks, his voice said on the recording. If we file the week after close, before Robert has time to reinvest the proceeds, we add roughly 9 to 12 million to her base settlement. And then, and this is the part that stopped my heart, depending on how aggressively we argue the spousal contribution angle, we may be able to petition for the entire company. The entire company. Everything I had built. I sat with that for a long time. The final recording came from our bedroom, 3 days before mediation. I had placed the third device there 2 weeks in, and Vanessa had invited William over late on a Thursday night after I'd supposedly gone to sleep. I lay in the dark upstairs and listened to the cloud upload the next morning. What I heard was not just betrayal. It was a blueprint. William's voice was calm, almost academic. We paint him as controlling, financially withholding, emotionally unavailable. We have Marcus, Corey, and myself, all prepared to testify that you confided in us about feeling trapped, financially dependent, isolated from business decisions. Fabricated? Yes. But in a divorce proceeding, testimony is performance, and we have rehearsed this well, Vanessa's voice. And if he fights back, William, then we bury him in litigation. The legal costs alone will cripple even a company his size. He wins the battle and loses the war. A pause. Either way, darling, by the time this is over, Robert Caldwell is going to wish he had never underestimated you. There was a long silence on the recording after that, and then Vanessa said something quiet that I've turned over in my mind many times since. I almost feel bad. Almost. She almost felt bad. I arrived at the mediation building in downtown Houston on a Thursday morning that smelled like rain. The glass towers on Texas Avenue were already catching the low gray light. Marcus was beside me, briefcase in hand, and he looked like a man who was very calm and very prepared, which he was. We had spent the previous 2 weeks doing nothing but preparing. Vanessa was already in the room when we walked in. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, her hair done the way she used to wear it when she wanted to impress people. Her attorney, a man named Hargrove, who charged $900 an hour, launched immediately into their demands. $95 million in marital assets split at 50%. $30 million in compensatory damages for alleged emotional distress, financial control, and exclusion from business decisions. And the finale, a petition for dissolution of Caldwell Commercial Group, arguing my business decisions had been made without proper spousal consultation. I watched her face while Hargrove talked. There was no grief there, no sadness about the end of a marriage, just the focused attention of someone watching a transaction unfold according to plan. She caught me watching and gave me a small, composed smile, the smile of someone who believes she has already won. Marcus let them finish. He let every number land. Then he reached into his briefcase and placed a small digital recorder on the table. Hargrove frowned. "What is this?" "Audio recordings from the marital residence over the past 6 weeks, Marcus said. His voice was absolutely level, made with single-party consent in a single-party consent state, fully admissible. Vanessa went still. I watched the color leave her face. It didn't drain, it left, cleanly, all at once, like a curtain being pulled from a window. Her hands, which had been folded so calmly on the table, went flat. Hargrove started to object: illegal surveillance, invasion of privacy. He had several angles ready, and Marcus let him run through all of them before explaining, slowly and thoroughly, why none of them applied. Then he pressed play. Her voice filled the conference room. 22 years, and he has absolutely no idea. Clear, unmistakable, warm with laughter. The room went so quiet I could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Hargrove had stopped writing. His pen was hovering above his notepad like he'd forgotten what pens were for. Marcus played 7 excerpts in sequence, each one worse than the last. Javier discussing my travel schedule. Corey mapping my routines and calling trust my weakness. William calculating how to maximize her settlement by timing the filing against my contract close. And then the bedroom recording the conspiracy in full, the coordinated plan to lie under oath, to fabricate evidence of abuse, to bury me in litigation even if she couldn't win outright. When the final excerpt ended, the silence was enormous. Vanessa looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down. Her eyes were different now. The calculation was still there, but underneath it, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I saw something real. It might have been fear. It might have been something closer to shame. "How long?" she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. 6 weeks of recordings, I said. 18 months of suspicion. 22 years of marriage. I paused. "Take your pick." Hargrove whispered something in her ear. She nodded slowly. Marcus slid a single document across the table. $5 million. A comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Full cessation of all claims against me and the company. She had until 5 p.m. "That's nothing," she said. Her voice was still quiet, but there was something raw in it now. After everything you planned," I said, and I surprised myself by how steady I sounded. 5 million is generosity. At 4:52 that afternoon, Marcus called me. She signed. I was sitting in my truck in the parking garage, listening to the hum of the ventilation system, watching a pigeon walk along a concrete divider like it had nowhere important to be. I sat with that call for a moment before I said anything. 22 years. Reduced to a phone call in a parking garage. A pigeon. A ventilation hum. "Okay," I said. "Okay." The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Vanessa moved out efficiently and without drama, taking what was genuinely hers, her jewelry, her clothes, a few pieces of artwork she'd collected, and leaving behind everything that had been shared. Our wedding album. The photograph from our 10th anniversary in Tuscany. The furniture we'd chosen together at that gallery on Montrose. She didn't say goodbye, and I didn't go downstairs to watch her go. There was nothing left that needed saying between us. Javier, Corey, and William disappeared from her life the moment the scheme collapsed. She had used them, and they had used her back, and when the structure fell, they scattered the way small things scatter in wind. She faced the end alone, which was the only honest thing that happened in that room. I held a meeting with my senior team at Caldwell Commercial Group 2 weeks later. These were people who had built this company alongside me. Linda Chen, my project manager of 15 years, 3 foremen who had been with me since the original crew, a contracts manager named Jerome who knew our legal exposure better than most attorneys. I told them what had happened, in broad terms, and I told them their jobs were secure and the company was stable. Then I did something I should have done years earlier. I restructured how we operated. Profit sharing for long-term employees, flexible scheduling for people raising families, an apprenticeship program for young people from the 5th Ward and 3rd Ward who wanted to learn the trades. I had spent so many years building the company's financial value that I had missed opportunities to build its actual value, the humankind. The Henderson contract closed and came in under budget, which led to 3 follow-on municipal projects. By the end of that fiscal year, the company was valued at $240 million. I sold the Memorial House. Too many rooms with too much history in them. I bought a smaller place overlooking Attic's reservoir, clean lines, high windows, a deck that faces west so you catch the full sunset over the water. I decorated it entirely according to my own tastes, for the first time in 2 decades. No compromise, no performance, just what I actually liked. If you have ever lived for years inside a life that was built around someone else's preferences, their dinner choices, their social circle, their aesthetic, their idea of what a successful couple looked like, and then one day you are sitting in a space that is entirely your own. You understand something that is very difficult to explain. It is not loneliness. It is the opposite. It is the discovery that you have been lonely for years in company, and that being alone can feel like coming up for air. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Donna, the friend Vanessa used to claim she was calling during those suspicious phone calls at a charity event downtown. We ended up talking for an hour over bad coffee in a corner of the venue. She told me she had always suspected something was wrong, but not the scale of it. She talked about you like you were a resource, Donna said carefully, looking for the least unkind way to say it. Not like you were a person she loved. It was always what you provided, never who you were. That conversation mattered to me more than I expected, because the question I had been sitting with, the one I couldn't put down, was whether any of it had been real. Whether there was any version of Vanessa that had genuinely loved me, even briefly, even imperfectly. And Donna's answer, delivered with genuine compassion, was the most honest thing anyone said to me that entire year. I don't think she knew how, Donna said. I think she decided a long time ago that love was a vulnerability she couldn't afford, and she never looked back. I thought about that for a long time. What this whole experience taught me, and I mean this not as a moral attached to a story, but as something I learned the hard way at 63 years old, is that the most dangerous blind spot isn't ignorance. It's the choice to not see. I chose for years to interpret the signs generously. I chose to explain away the silences, the patterns, the phone calls. Not because I was stupid, but because looking directly at the truth meant dismantling something I had invested my entire emotional life in building. And I want to ask you something, genuinely, right now. Is there something in your life that you are choosing not to look at directly? Not because you can't see it, but because seeing it would cost you something you're not ready to pay? Sit with that. Because the real mistake I made wasn't trusting Vanessa. The real mistake was outsourcing my discernment to my desire to believe. And the one thing I would tell anyone facing something like this, whether it is a marriage, a business partnership, a friendship, is this: your instincts are not your enemy. When something doesn't add up, that feeling is information. Don't file it somewhere you won't have to look at it. Look at it. On my 65th birthday, I threw a party at the company's main office. Linda organized it. There were children running around the courtyard from the employee families, tables set up in the project bay, the kind of genuine mess that means people are actually comfortable somewhere. I stood in the doorway watching it, and felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph, not vindication. Something quieter, something that felt like, this is real. Linda found me standing there. You seem lighter, she said. I am lighter, I said. Any regrets? I thought about it honestly. I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret the years I spent trying to sustain something that was never what I thought it was. I paused. But I don't regret ending it. I'm grateful it ended before I wasted the rest of my life. She nodded, and we stood there for a moment in the noise and warmth of a party thrown by people who actually liked being in the same room together. And I thought about how long it had been since I'd been in a room like that. Later that night, I sat on my deck with a glass of something good, watching the sun dissolve into Attic's reservoir, the water going orange and then deep red, and then the quiet, dark purple of a Houston evening in late spring. And I raised the glass in a private toast to honesty, to instinct, to the hard work of starting over when you are old enough to know better and young enough to still matter. I'm glad you stayed with me until the end of this. I mean that. Stories like this one, they don't get easier to tell just because time passes, but they get more worth telling. So before you go, I want to ask you something directly. Drop a 1 the comments if you think Robert handled this exactly right, a 2 if you think he should have confronted Vanessa the moment he heard that first recording, or a 3 if there's part of this story that you're still not sure about, because I genuinely want to know what you think. And tell me what city you're watching from, and what time it is there. I love seeing where this story reaches. And if something in this story touched something real in your own life, if you've ever trusted someone completely, and had that trust used against you, I want to know that too. You don't have to say much. Just knowing you're out there, that someone else has walked a version of this road, means more than I can say. If this story moved you, if it made you feel less alone in something, subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting. Real ones, human ones. Stories about the things we build, the things we lose, and the things that turn out to be worth more than anything we could have predicted. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston, Texas, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.